Hello and welcome to the Green Room podcast. My name's Garen and we have an amazing guest today. And this space is what we've got is to step up behind the scenes of life and exploring purpose, creativity and personal growth. Here in the Green Room, we don't just talk about success. We talk about the journey, the lessons, the challenges, and the moments that shape us to who we become. And every episode is a real conversation designed to inspire, inform, and connect. So wherever you are right now, get comfortable, lock in, and stay present, because this is more than just a conversation, it's a story. And now let's step into today's episode. So today I'm joined by Sarah Vazquez, and somebody whose story is both deeply human and incredibly powerful. Sarah is a psychotherapist and hypnotherapist and ADHD-informed coach, specializing in behavior change and the relationship we have with ourselves and others. But more than that, she's someone who's lived the very experience she now helps others navigate. And Sarah's journey into this work wasn't planned. Like many, she found herself struggling in silence, navigating internal pressure, emotional overwhelm, and using alcohol as a way to cope with a mind that never seemed to slow down. What once felt like a relief gradually becomes something that made life harder, leading her through dark and challenging periods. And for years, Sarah searched for change externally, traveling, teaching abroad, and trying to find a place where life felt easier. But eventually, she reached a powerful realization: no matter where she went, she was still carrying this weight and these internal struggles with her. And this was truly where everything began to change. And through rebuilding her life, accessing support, and later receiving an ADHD diagnosis in her mid-40s, Sarah began to understand herself in a completely new way. And what once felt like personal flaws started to make sense. And that understanding became the foundation of the work that Sarah does today. And now Sarah is passionate about helping people break free from shame, understand the patterns behind their behavior, and realize something important. There was never anything wrong with them. They just didn't have the right tools. And this is a conversation about self-understanding, addiction, and identity, and what really means to rebuild your relationship with yourself. And if you'd like to know more about Sarah and her work, you can visit holistictherapy.co.uk, and I will leave all the information in the podcast in the comment section below. So yes, I've waffled on enough, Sarah. So welcome to the Green Room, and thank you so much for giving your time for your busy schedule. I really appreciate that.
Well, what an introduction, Garen. Thank you very much for having me. It's very, lovely to be here. I'm very grateful. Thank you
Lovely.
for this space.
Yeah, no worries at all. It's a true honor, as I say to all my guests in regards to this. So as we know, we dive in. That's what we do as therapists sometimes. So let's start at the beginning, with your life before all of this kind of progressed you to where you are in your careers to this day. So if we go back to the beginning before everything shifted, what did life feel like for you, as you was growing up, Sarah?
You know, my poor mum has often said, was there something wrong in your childhood? When I was sort of like really struggling, and actually, no, it was a very happy childhood. I've got an amazing family, and everything on the surface for me was lovely, because often you hear maybe of things that go wrong, and then perhaps you go to childhood and things, oh, okay, there was this trauma, there was that, and not taking anything away. But for me, sometimes I used to think, well, nothing bad has really happened. um but I guess through learning about myself, through having my own therapy, I guess, and now what I know, I always felt when I was growing up that, like, I always felt like the odd one out, like the one who didn't quite fit in. Again, on the surface, you wouldn't think so, but it was always internally for me. It was always, I'm just not quite enough, or, I just don't get on like as well, like as other people do, or, I'm not as, sounds like I'm not as popular, things just didn't seem quite in sync with where I kind of should be, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Sure. And I presume this, on that time of like self-exploration with yourself, that kind of led to some self-doubt within yourself within that time.
Lots of self-doubt. I think I covered that all up by working very hard. And so achievement maybe was perhaps something that I used to make myself feel better about myself, in the sense of, oh, well, I wasn't naturally clever or gifted or anything, but I did work hard to to get those grades, or say, go on that path of, college and
Hmm.
university. And I mean, I do love learning, that is the truth. But I was perhaps using it at the time for the wrong thing. It was almost like that self-doubt could just be quiet, because maybe I'd say, well, at least I've got this, and at least I've achieved that, at least I've done that,
Hmm.
those milestones, really. But perhaps it was always about me trying to find my way, or to fit in some respects. But
And
it
there,
always kind of was in a lot of conflict with perhaps like my internal world, always battling between this and maybe the reality as well.
sure. And it sounds like you was going through obviously your core beliefs and some cognitive distortions there in regards to, who am I and where do I fit in, which can be really hard.
Yeah.
But what I admire you back there is that you was challenging it and not really realizing it, which is quite powerful, which I presume has led you on to where you are today.
Yes, quite a journey, really, because I think one thing that really stands out for sure is in my teenage years, as every teenager does, we found alcohol. And it was only really then, I remember, I know this might sound cliche, but I remember, like, when I had alcohol, like, it took away the fear of not being liked, the fear of that judgment from people, the fear of, oh, I've said the wrong thing, that constant self-doubt. It kind of took away all of that, gave me a sense of maybe freedom, and I can just be me, kind of thing. So, of course, on a temporary scale, it worked really well. I was able to, like my brain could slow down. I could stop the overthinking. But of course, when this became perhaps more of a go-to, perhaps a coping mechanism, um, then of course it becomes a problem rather than, something that's going to solve an issue, because we all know it doesn't, naturally.
Sure. And obviously, it started to show up for you in regards to consuming alcohol, because sometimes we can feel a little bit invincible with ourselves, whether it's alcohol or substances, because it gives us that kind of relief as well as escapism sometimes. And again, with
Yeah.
alcohol, as we know it, as we call it, the old Dutch courage, so to speak, it can kind of give us some confidence there. So, in regards to when did you recognize within yourself, if you don't mind me asking, when you noticed this started to show up more as coping and kind of like some escape in there? Because obviously through your teenage years, and I'd be lying if many of us don't go down that route. But at the same time, when did you start recognizing, well, hang on a minute, this is more of escapism and
Yeah, I think I'd always maybe be known as a bit of a party girl, and and that's said in the nicest possible way as well. Or Sarah, she's up for a fun time, she's sociable. Little did they know, though, that it was becoming, I was having that alcohol because it was to be sociable, it was to feel confident. I never forget someone saying to me once, like, you don't need alcohol, you're really confident anyway. And I was thinking, no, I'm that. And I often use this analogy with clients, but I'm like that, the swan on the lake, and looks all graceful and serene, but underneath the legs are going 10 to a dozen, like that. But I think uh, when I was younger, I decided I wanted to move abroad, to teach English as a foreign language. And again, it was that, well, if I go to this place, maybe I'll feel like I fit in. Maybe I'll feel like, I can relax. Um, anyway, that was part of it. But I went to Japan and taught English over there. And actually, that was a really happy time. But I also think I had a really good network of support of people around me. In terms of the friends that I met there, it's like I had a really lovely, like, family unit, if you were. And then I came home, I did my PGCE here. Um, and then after a couple of years here, I was like, right, okay, ready to go again. I'd just been through a breakup there. Um, and we went our separate ways. And again, I thought, okay, time for me to go. things are starting to feel a bit uncomfortable here. Let's go. So off I went again. And I actually think that it was in the UAE where my problems really started to, well, the drinking in terms of how I used it to cope really became an issue, because I feel like I just didn't really feel, I think, like I fitted in some strange way. That's where it started to get escalate, which these things often do as well.
It's very interesting when we look at escapism, don't we, to try and figure out who we really are. And it's in the path to yourself, Sarah. Any problems in life I had, I thought, well, I can go abroad. I've got the money. And yeah, I thought I could find my answers there, but you'd still come back and you're like, well, I'm still here and nothing's changed. And it,
Exactly. You're
mm,
always going to be sitting with yourself at the end of the day. And I know many coaches, therapists, we talk about things like sitting with the uncomfortable. And
yeah,
it really was those uncomfortable feelings that I didn't like sitting with. So
yeah,
escapism, whether that was through drink, whether that was through another country, just was always the go-to,
hmm
you know.
hmm a big fan of Young. Not saying I know his theory, I love his theories, but it's learning to sit in our own shadow sometimes, which will make us feel
Hmm.
uncomfortable. But I'm
Hmm.
a great believer that it's truly where we learn, and it's one of the hardest things. Because let's be honest, we've numbed these thoughts and pains for so long, and let's be honest, they're still going to be in the background for us, no matter where we kind of escape or run, kind of go to try and look for our answers. So in regards to, if you don't mind me asking, uh, what was you searching for, Sarah?
It's an age-old question, isn't it? Because it's like, where was I going? What was I looking for? I think I was searching for peace in a sense. And that was peace from me, my mind, that constant, perhaps inner critic as well, that constant self-doubter, self-shamer, self-loathing, perhaps, Um, and of course, when you throw perhaps drink on top of anything, and too much of it, by the way, and my life started to become very chaotic. So it's almost maybe I just try to keep on going, keep on going. And I think you touched on it in the intro. It's like I didn't know anything else. I didn't have any tools at the time. I love it when a younger person comes to see me for coaching and whatnot, because I think, oh, I wish I'd had knowledge or that opportunity to do
Hmm
the same. But of course, it wasn't really heard of, really, or it was
hmm
getting stronger, but back then, so it's you're just going with your head, and in my head at the time that wasn't really a very good place to go with, but as you do.
Sure. And I mean, again, like what you said, it's really funny us as therapists when we reflect on that and we can relate to our clients with our own personal journey and kind of really relate to that. And we do sometimes question in regards to like, why wasn't the help quite there for me? But we do find out. And, I use a bit of humor with other therapists, as I'm sure you know, and I normally say to them, why is it us therapists seem to take the long route around? And I don't think there's one of them who's had a
Yeah.
shortcut and got it right. We still do it the same. You're like, what are you doing? I'm going to learn, obviously. And we seem
Yeah,
to learn harder sometimes.
but perhaps as well it was when I started to do some training and started to look at myself, it was understandable because my default was to always avoid myself, never look at me. It was always to shake that responsibility off, which was at the time much easier to do. So I think, once I started to come into this world, it was that I, it's about looking inwards now
Hmm
rather than all of that outwards. Well, if I move here, I'll do this. If I drink this, it'll help this. If I do this, no,
hmm
stop, stop,
Yeah,
just stop. Look at yourself, you
sure.
know.
And it's what we learn in therapy is doing opposite action. And again, I'm not sure about you, Sarah. I remember, I think I said earlier before I recorded in regards, I remember reading I go back and read my first review every so often. I have a little chuckle. I'm like, my friend, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. So enthusiastic. I'm like, oh yes, I'm going to go and help everyone. And then before you know
Down
it,
the
like,
rabbit hole we
yeah,
go.
here we go.
Yeah.
You've done your level 2. We're on 3 now. Get your essays done. It's like, oh God, catapult. But
Yeah.
I'm grateful for my journey, and as we know yourself, we learn. I'm a firm believer with therapists that we find our own area how we work with people. Obviously, i.e. with yourself, and I'm a firm believer that our life experience can truly help our clients. We've had particularly guys, as you know, some guys are very blunt. Not saying some females are, but they always ask me straight away, and they're quite blunt. It's like, oh, you've written all that great stuff on your website, but have you got any life experience? And they really hit me head on with that. And myself goes, I don't give them my bank details, but I do let
Mhm.
them know. I think it's all down to the relationship you have with that client, because you can't just offload to them, because otherwise you'll be making the sessions about yourself. But I think it's about
Exactly.
that therapeutic relationship to let them know that, I fell on hard times too. I'm not saying I
Yeah.
get it right all the time, because I'm human. I've just
Yeah.
hopefully managed to find the right tools for me to maintain this the best I can. And, as you know, we're still work in progress to this day.
And that's interesting there, Garon, because maybe it was the third or fourth therapist in, and I remember him saying to me, he said, "Look, I've been there. Like I've been here, or this has happened in my life." And I remember thinking, "Wow, really, and that really helped in opening up to him, because I felt because don't forget, I'd had a decade, or 2 decades of self judgment and thinking
Yeah.
everyone is judging me. So to finally maybe think, oh, well, this is a therapist and they're not judging me, this feels great. And so, because of course in my journey, there was a lot of doubt of, oh, well, can I really be a therapist? Can I really help somebody else? And
Mm-hmm.
the answer is, well, yes, because in a lot of ways it helps to relate and identify. And again, there's a fine line, not that it's about me, the therapy room, but it is about saying it's okay. Like, and of course no one's perfect. And,
Sure.
we've all, we're all at certain points in our life, maybe just different paths.
Sure. And that's really powerful what you said there in regards to the therapist, kind of letting him know, he hears you, and that can be quite empowering for that person, especially when we let our guard down in therapy. I remember seeing my very first therapist years back, and I mean, I was only got about 2, 3 months off the cocaine at the time. And I'm not going to lie, as a guarded guy, I was anxious. I
Mm,
pulled over countless times
mm,
before I even got there, panic attacks, and I didn't know what they were. And instantly, I had a huge judgment as soon as she opened that door. I looked at her, and excuse the French, I was like, what's she going to do? I was so judgmental and guarded. So when I look back, I still don't remember. I
yeah,
remember where I saw her, but I still don't remember her name. So if she does have a log in, thank you, because she given me the direction I needed. But I did go in there quite guarded. And
yeah,
instantly, from a guy's perspective, looking at a young female walk out, really? Are you really going to
yeah,
help me? And I went
yeah,
in there pissed off. I'm not going to lie. But she broke me down and she helped me start questioning myself. And as I've said in the past, I'm not going to lie, she really helped me kick me back on track in a big way. So I'm forever grateful for that. So anyone going to therapy, if a therapist lets their guard down to you, open up to them. That's what they're there for.
yeah,
So yeah, so it's
yeah.
amazing that realization kind of kicked you and questioning of, hang on a
Well,
minute.
it can be nerve-wracking, can't it, going to therapy for the first time? And I
Hmm.
also think there's a little bit of um, judgment on our part as a client, to
Yeah,
think like, well, how are you going to help me?
yeah,
What do you know? Kind of,
hmm, yeah.
like, oh, what, I'm just going to sit here and talk. And as I said, again, you've tried to avoid talking about yourself or looking at yourself or seeing
Yeah,
yourself, for however many years it's been going on for.
yeah,
So,
hmm,
it is quite a scary prospect. So to have someone there to say, it's okay, it's not Miss Perfect sitting here in front of you, can help to build that, therapist client relationship. It's
sure.
important.
And I do. I always reflect back from remembering that day, and I think one of the things which is my shift in life was when I had all my studio stuff with my parents, and she said, "What's your room like?" I'm not gonna lie, I was really guarded. Instantly, I'm saying, "What am I 6? I know how to tidy my bedroom," and when I left that session, I was really pissed off and frustrated. But when I got
There
home,
was a method
so
in her
very
madness, though, wasn't
clever.
there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very clever. Came home and I was like, well, she clearly can't help me. And you know what? When I went back, it wasn't messy, it was just unorganized, Sarah. And do you know what? For me, that will always stick to me, especially through rehab. I've had so many people say this: a tidy room creates a tidy mind. And I'm such a firm believer of that. And it kind of, I remember tidying that one corner and not being funny. The week later, I skipped to therapy saying, "Guess what I've done?" And it was such a looking at the world, thinking, "Well, anyone can tidy their room," but for me, it was such a big mountain to climb, and I started to feel good about myself. So,
Well, that's interesting because, within sort of like the neurodivergence field, ADHD in particular,
mhm,
we're kind of stereotypically, you're messy, you're untidy, everything's in your room is a mess. I would say, that it's a spectrum. Of course, it differs. Myself, you will come into my home and it's really tidy. However, if you go in my drawers, they are a mess. But if you
sure,
take it one step further, I find that what happened for me is up here was very messy. You know,
yeah,
this is what needed to be kind of decluttered, as I
hmm
said. So, this is where once I started to take responsibility for this and take notice of this and actually start to declutter it. But again, you have to be aware of overwhelm, because going in too much too soon just creates then that panic and that escapism for my personal journey experience.
mm,
So it was about going at it like, in small manageable steps. And of
sure,
course, we're all different, so what
yeah,
works for one person might not work for another. And it's finding those things out about yourself. I might use a tool with one client, but that tool doesn't fit with another client. So it's about recognizing that and understanding that, but also for yourself and having that voice to say, "Oh, I don't think that really quite went there for me. Let's do something else." So decluttering here as well is really important, and having that person to trust to help you do that.
sure. And it seems like a
Yeah.
prime example of a therapist there, just to break it down for people. Because as
Yeah.
again, depending what diagnosis most people have, we have all this clutter in our mind and we're trying to figure it all out once. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I say to my clients, I said, I've only said it once to a client and he goes, "Oh, I don't like cake." But I said, well, just think of it like we got a big chunk of cake here and we want to eat it. We've got to break it down into segments instead of trying to figure it all out at once. We're either going to, as I call sometimes the greyhound, people push themselves too much. And I always say to them, look, step back a little bit. We need to do it at your pace. So you're most importantly not setting yourself up to fail. And as you know yourself, Sarah, sometimes we have to sit with our clients to do that. Say, okay, you tried that route, let's try another way, you
Well,
know?
again, it reminds me, because again, say with ADHD is very much about, okay, but I want to do it now. I want to fix now. I have so many clients are coming in like, but it's just not working. I'm not where I want to be. And I
Yeah.
was in exactly that same position. Like, why can't I get a grip on this? What is up with me? So and so's done it. So and so's done it. What's wrong with me? And it is about recognizing that these things take time, you know. And it is in the small steps, and it can take for however long or however little. It it's your journey, and I hate that word, as most of us do, but there's nowhere else to describe it. It is your path, your journey,
That's
and
right.
you just do what you have to do, without the comparison trap going on, which is
Yeah.
another area that we struggle with too.
Course, and again, that's sometimes we push ourselves too much. And like I said earlier, I call some of my clients a greyhound. I'm like, right, just step
Mm.
back. I understand that Joe Bloggs can do what you're doing or you want to do at the moment, but you've got to remember, like what you say. I'm always quite open with my clients. I said, you've got to remember it's your journey. I can give you all the tools under the world, or any therapist can. It's how you use these tools and finding the right fit for you. And sometimes I always say to them, it's like I've got to pull the reins back. Sometimes I'm like, right, come back, pace
I
yourself. Let's
sort of
break
see it
it
as a
down.
fishing rod,
I
like just reel me back in, because
Yeah,
I'm over there. Just
yeah,
bring me back in again,
yeah,
and I'll
yeah,
use that with my clients as well. I'm
yeah,
just going to reel you in. It's
yeah,
just whoa, whoa, whoa,
yeah,
whoa, whoa.
yeah.
Carried
And
away there.
it's very interesting. A lot of clients. I'm really glad you said that because I find it with some of my clients. I'm kind of like, come back. Where are you going?
Mm.
Let's start on the basis. I love it that it's not just me, Sarah.
No,
So
it's not just you.
So kind of what kind of, if we have a look at like your turning point, because obviously you've been through a hell of a lot with suppressing where you was and trying to discover who Sarah was, going abroad, so kind of blocking everything out, with the alcohol being the pie head that you was, and again obviously you was questioning a lot of stuff and you started kind of having some ideas, going through particular therapists therapist. And what I always say to any client is that it needs to be about you, not the therapist ego. So I'm really glad you found that right therapist who said, do you know what, Sarah, I get it. So that can be a really powerful shift for people. So what kind of changed you? What was that kind of turning point for yourself? Because obviously you put a hell of a lot of work here to discover who you are. So I mean, what changed that after realization?
Got to say that I don't think it was anything completely profound. I don't think there was a particular event or anything like that. And I think when I look back, I had many turning points, but then it just didn't quite happen, you know. But I would say that a huge part of it for me was, and how can I say this? I can't, it's a little bit abstract. It's like acceptance of myself, acceptance of the things that had happened in the past, accepting that I'm recognizing that the past does not define me. And also, I think forgiveness for myself too, you know. Um, yeah, I just think like just finding that peace within. And again, I know that sounds probably a little bit corny, but I can't really put my finger on it. Um, but just that it's okay, you know, it's okay. You made mistakes. Um, a turning point in some sense was the ADHD diagnosis, which was fairly recent, you know, um, and that kind of I maybe, and I know this is not going to work for everybody, but for me, it kind of gave me that understanding. And I'll always say that the phrase is, you know, it's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. You know, the explanation for maybe why I did never feel like I quite fitted in, why my mind was always busy and racing, why I could take rejection, you know, so badly, for days, you know, feeling like, why don't they like me? What's wrong with me? They haven't done this. You know, it's a lot. Um, and that impulsive side as well of, okay, well, I'll just have a drink and it'll make it all go better then. I've really found some real deep understanding there the more that I've looked into everything and had those conversations.
Sure. So, I mean, you've really head on with looking inward, and obviously with your ADHD diagnosis, it kind of gave you some sort of confirmation of why I'm responding in the behavior where, you know, where I am. Some people want that, some people don't, which again, I can really truly see why people want those answers, because we do question ourselves. Why am I responding to the way it is? And look, you made a key point earlier, and I say it to some of my clients, whether it's relationship breakdowns or, again, that's what I say to people in sessions. There's two things we can't avoid in this life, which is taxes and death. And when I go through stages of grief with some of my clients, I can feel guilty sometimes when I say to them, it's part of acceptance, of accepting where we are. And I always say to people, don't think it's a easy pill to swallow. You know, people can take years and some people never get through that. But it is for accepting of where you are and how you move forward. You know, I'm so
Yeah.
relieved that you made that brave move. And, you know, I don't know about yourself. When I was in that position, it's like, I have got to swallow this and I've got to move forward. And well, it took me
Yeah.
years to kind of even dance near it, Sarah.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely. Yeah.
and we do find that eventually. So it kind of brought some clarity and started to make sense to yourself in regards to where you are to this current day. And
Yeah, I think it certainly helped me to, you know, um, recognize what was going on for me and why I responded or reacted in the way that I did. And also it helped me to, and even now it helps me to name things now. So I might go, oh, I know who you are. You know, you're this rejection things, you're showing up, you know, I know what I'm going to do with you. So, you know, some people might think I'm going mad, and I will often have these conversations with myself as in like, yeah, I know what's going on here. You can go away now, rather than spinning it into this elaborate story that we
yeah.
have a tendency of doing. And of course, that's all living up here and living in the imagination and all the things that actually have never happened yet. And as you said before, it's about that kind of stepping away.
Yeah, and then we know ourselves, even as therapists, we had to discuss with us earlier when it comes to, you know, pushing ourselves and stepping back sometimes. I'll be lying if I said I get it perfect every time. And if there's any therapists out there and you say you got it right all the time, I
No, I
don't,
don't
but
think
we
so.
try. But in general, obviously, if we have a look at kind of, your personal journey growing into this professional path, which you gained, great growth from this. So tell me about the moment kind of just before you making that sort of kind of leap of faith, so to speak, for being kind of like the client, so to speak, to that person on the opposite side of the room.
Yes, it was very much. I never thought, yeah, because I was, as far as I was concerned, I was a teacher, and that was going to be me set for life. Um, but then obviously the universe or whoever had different plans,
Mhm.
and it became something where I thought, I was supported when I came here, very much by my family always, and then also by different therapists, and then like my current therapist now, who I see sort of like every so often now, just
Mhm.
touching base, as we said before.
Mhm.
Um, and I just think, I thought, I really want to help people like me, people who thought that they were actually going crazy, because that
Of
was me.
course.
People who thought, like, I'm never gonna get anywhere, I'm never gonna get any help,
Mhm.
constantly questioning myself. And I just wanted to, I guess, like the saying goes, pay it forward. So um I, and I actually thought, when I was going into my training, I thought, well, if anything, if nothing say comes of this, then at least I'm exploring myself. At least I'm
Mhm.
understanding self. But then, as it happened, it kind of just snowballed, and I've been really fortunate in the sense that I've been able to, like, work for myself and my own practice, and look after my little boy
Excellent.
alongside. It's fitted in really, really nicely. Um, and you know, my clients, I love supporting them, but they support me just as much. I don't ever want it to, it's not an ego thing. It's nothing like that. It's about, do you know how much you help me? Your story helps me. Or when you say, this worked for me, Sarah, or this didn't work,
Yeah.
it's very investing job, isn't it? As you
Of
know
course.
yourself,
Yeah.
you know. And I want to see them, genuinely want to see them do well, because I believe everybody can change.
Of
It just
course.
takes a bit of support and guidance, and the tools along the way. But of
Mm.
course, you've got to want to do it at the end of the day too.
Course you have. As we say to our clients, you made a valid point there. That I say to my clients, what you need to remember. You think I'm sat here on my high pedestal and I've got all the answers for you. I'm not gonna lie, I don't. But at the same time, it's hopefully giving you the right tools to help you find your own answers. And I always say to them, I grow from you as much as you grow from me, so I can move on and help on. The other clients of this world, and I'm a firm believer we can learn just as much from our clients as they can learn from us. So really powerful
Absolutely.
what you said there, and we do. You kind of, oh, okay, I'm growing from this, and people don't realize we go on such a journey with our clients sometimes. I mean, there's been a couple times when I've been a little bit choked in a session, and I always say to clients, "Can you give me a minute?" And sometimes with guys, they take the mickey sometimes, and we have a bit of humour in there just to lighten things up. And I sometimes said, you got to remember, I can feel what you're going through sometimes, and I always say to him, let me have a sip of my water. I need a minute. And that's my defense mechanism. I start giggling a bit. So I'm like, "Ooh, I'm making myself vulnerable to my client." So that can be quite a powerful shift sometimes. So I'm really glad that's kind of the way you look and how you work with your clients. That can be so powerful. So one of the big ones here, when we look at kind of our shame and our healing, why is shame such a big focus on where we are when we're in that place?
See, I think shame is such a heavy emotion, and it's a heavy emotion to carry. And I think shame encourages us to stay hidden, stay secret, stay closed off from the world. And so shame can actually put us into places that are very isolated and very lonely. Um, and shame is what, and certainly maybe for me, and all of the self criticism I had anyway, it would be like, oh, they're so ashamed of me, they don't love me anymore. And that to carry undoubtedly made my behaviors worse, at a certain point in my life, because I think it was that feeling of my shame that I was shaming myself with was only keeping me smaller and more vulnerable and more isolated, and my habits more maladaptive, you know. And I think when you can actually come and talk to somebody about those things in a safe, confidential space, it's taking the power out of it. It's taking away that power that shame has over you. And I'm also really big on reframing things and giving things a different perspective. Well, how about we see it like this? And how about we see it like that? And once you start doing that on yourself, you can go, oh, okay, I can see that girl was really scared, or I can see that she was in a really tricky place. And again, it's about understanding and compassion, because a lot of us think, oh, I'm just making excuses. Oh, it's not. You were doing what you thought was perhaps the best at the time, you know.
And it's kind of more about kind of understanding and trying to fix the scenario which we're going through, and it's having more of an understanding, because sometimes we can be stuck, and having that realization and recognizing where we are and where we're going. Even that, yourself, our own self-discoveries, even as therapists, it's a really hard thing we've got to do, isn't it? And again, we've been through the emotions, scared, anxious. We want to run to Timbuktu and not come back again. And sometimes we, again, go back to like Carl Jung's work. Sometimes we have got to sit in that shadow, and that it's not easy. I always say to my clients, it's going to hurt you. We have to process this, otherwise we're going to keep avoiding it. It's a tough one there. So again, in regards to, where kind of obviously understanding and fixing where you are. So coming towards the end of things here, and I genuinely want to say personally, thank you to yourself for giving me your time and so much insight you've given me in regards to people and your journey within yourself with ADHD. And so, thank you so much for your honesty. And, for anybody listening, you're not broken. You may just have, haven't had the tools yet, the right tools to help you kind of manage this. And I mean, now this is your spotlight, Sarah, and this be putting you in the position. So how can people get hold of Sarah? How do they get hold of Sarah in regards to this? As you can see, I kind of took a dive there.
You shimmy that. You put me on the spot. We hate being put on the spot, Garen. Okay. Yes, of course. If anything came up for you in today's conversation with yourself, Garen, obviously there's so much more. I could probably go on for 3 hours or even further, Garen. But yes, if you'd just like to know more, please go to my website, www.holistictherapy.co.uk. Or, I'm on Instagram. Sarah J Holistic Therapist, I think it is there. Message me. I'll always get back to you. And just really believe you're not alone. Some things you might have identified within today's conversation, or something might have come up for you, and you just want to, have a chat. And yeah, don't be afraid
Sure.
to get in touch.
And what would your message be to that person who's possibly listened to this, Sarah, who's kind of stuck and scared to make that step? Because, we've been ourselves. What would you want to say to that person?
I would say to that person, give yourself the chance, because you are worthy and you do deserve to live, a better life, a life that you deserve, and we all have the capability to change, and we don't need to stay stuck where we are. We just don't. I at times thought that, things weren't going to get better, things it's the end of the world. There's always a way, always.
Thank you so much, and I really apologise for throwing you underneath the bus out, but I've got to get up on fire.
It's the second time.
I ignored it first. But no, thanks so much for your time. And like I say, you've been listening to the Green Room podcast, and we've had Sarah Vazquez speaking to us about our journey and alcohol journey, as well as obviously a diagnosis of ADHD. So if you'd like to get in touch, I'm going to give you all the information about Sarah within the links on this podcast. So if you'd like to get in touch with Sarah, I'm sure sure she's doing amazing, fantastic work with all her clients, and that could be you as well. So thank you so much for your time, Sarah, and I really appreciate this, and I will make sure I get this out as soon as I can. And as we said, I'll send you all the goodies as we go along. So, and I would like to have you, like I say to all my guests, I'd like to have you guys on the show a bit further later on to see where you guys are, as a check-in, and whatever wisdom and knowledge you can throw out there to others. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me, Garen. Honestly, it's been a pleasure.
Lovely. Thank you again.
You weren't as bad as well.
Oh yeah, I saved. I was being nice, Sarah. Thank you again.
I hope you got everything there that you needed. Okay.
Everything's brilliant. Okay. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you. Take care.